John 1, 1 through 17. The Word was first, the Word present to God, God present to the Word. The Word was God, in readiness for God from day one.
Everything was created through him. Nothing, not a thing, came into being without him. What came into existence was life, and the life was light to live by. The light blazed out of the darkness couldn't put it out.
There once was a man, his name John, sent by God to point out the way to the light. He came to show everyone where to look, who to believe in. John was not himself the light, he was there to show the way to the light.
The light was the real thing. Every person entering it, he brings into light. He was in the world. The world was there through him, and yet the world didn't even notice.
He came to his own people, but they didn't want him. But whoever did want him, whoever believed he was who he claimed and would do what he said, he made to be their true selves, their child of God's selves.
These are the God begotten. No blood begotten, no flesh begotten, no sex begotten.
The Word became flesh and blood, and he moved into the neighborhood. We saw the glory with our own eyes, the one-of-a-kind glory, like Father, like Son, generous inside and out, true from start to finish.
John pointed him out and called, "This is the one I told you who was coming after me, but in fact was ahead of me. He was always been ahead of me. He has had the first word."
We all live off his generous bounty, gift after gift after gift. We got the basics from Moses, and then this exuberant giving and receiving. This endless knowing and understanding, all this came through Jesus, the Messiah.
First Samuel chapter 2, verse 1. He has heart and rejoices. He has made me strong.
Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Matthew 6, 9 through 13.
Give all your worries and cares to the Lord, for he cares about you. 1 Peter 5:7.
Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, it always trusts, it always hopes, and it always perseveres. Love never fails. Blue skies and rainbows and sunbeams from heaven are what I can see. When my Lord is living in me, I know that Jesus is well and alive today. He makes his home in my heart. Nevermore will I be all alone, since he promised me that we never would part. Tall mountains, green valleys, the beauty that surrounds me, all makes me aware of the one who made it all. I know that Jesus is well and alive today. He makes his home in my heart. Nevermore will I be all alone, since he promised me that we never would part.
Jesus loves me, yes I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong, they are weak but he is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me, yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so.
Well, if you have your Bibles, turn over to John chapter 1. We're going to actually be in a couple of places in John tonight. But I want to start by sharing this reading of John 1, 1 through 14. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that light was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children not born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or of a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. So I thought for the next 4 or 5 weeks on Wednesday nights, we'd talk about light. It's one of my favorite things to preach on. You've heard me preach many sermons about light. But tonight I want to talk about 2 different kinds of light. When I was a kid, I used to get a birthday package in the mail every year from my Aunt Edna. She was my mom's brother's wife, and she gave the best birthday presents. She somehow knew what an 8-year-old boy would like, and then also knew when I was 13 what a 13-year-old boy would like. And in these packages were just little trinkets, little things that she would find during the year that made her think about me. So there was one year I remember opening up a package that had silly putty and a slinky and some comic books. And then there was this flashlight. And my mom said, "Well, that's weird. Why would anybody want a flashlight?" To which my Aunt Edna explained, "It's so Jeffrey can read his comic books at night after you tell him to go to bed." Can you think of a better gift for an 8-year-old kid? As I got older, by the way, Aunt Edna kept sending me birthday gifts. They became in the form of what I really liked, which was cash. I think the last birthday card I got from her, I was already married, and in there was a sweet note from my Aunt Edna and a $20 bill. There's another kind of light, a light that you maybe don't want to get, and it's those blue and red lights behind you. You've all had the experience of driving at night or driving down a highway, or maybe you're on your way to work or on your way to something important when those lights flash behind you. You pull over to the side of the road, you find your license, you find your registration, you're thinking, have I gotten this car inspected? Am I carrying any illegal contraband? If you're like me, you get nervous. In fact, just the thought of those lights behind me kind of makes me sweat a little bit. And in my experience, I don't know, I just have a guilty face, I guess. Officers that come to give me tickets, they'll always take a flashlight out and scan the inside of my car, which they see all the debris of Taco Bell and Sonic, and it's really, really embarrassing. But I always get nervous at those kinds of light. You've probably heard me tell this story before. It's disgusting, and I love to tell it. It's from an author named Stephen Kingsley, and he talks about his family carpet cleaning business. You probably remember this one. In our family carpet cleaning business, we offered a special service for removing pet urine odors. To show potential customers their need for this service, I would darken the room and turn on a powerful black light. The black light caused urine crystals to glow brightly. To the horror of the homeowner, every drop and dribble could be seen, not only on the carpet, but usually on the walls, the drapes, the furniture, and even on lampshades. One homeowner begged me to shut off the light. "I can't bear to see anymore. I don't care what it costs. Please clean it up." Another woman said, "I'll never be comfortable in my home again. The offense was there all the time, but it was invisible until the right light exposed it." So, Jesus makes this statement several times in the book of John. He says, "I am the light of the world." This is in John 8:12. He says, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of light." And in a similar way, in John 9:5, he says, "Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." And the statement comes at two different, at the beginning and the end of two different stories. The statement in John 9 comes at the beginning of this story about a blind man that Jesus heals. Jesus is saying to him, I'm the light by which you are going to see. My light brings joy, it brings happiness, it allows people to see. And then there's this really famous story in John chapter 8, and it comes at the end of that story. And when Jesus says he is the light there, it seems to put a conclusion, a period, an ending, a fitting ending to this story. And in John chapter 8, I'll read this to you, or you can read along. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At dawn, he appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said, Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What do you say? Okay, so can you imagine for a moment what kind of lights the scribes and the Pharisees are carrying? That's right. They're the red and blue lights of the police. They're the maglite flashlight that's looking for all the sins and all the impurities in someone's life. They're the black light that exposes all of the worst about you. But Jesus does something interesting here. You see, the scribes and the Pharisees, they want to trick him. And so they're using the law. They're saying the law has to be applied. The light should shine in this and make justice come about. It's interesting that the old law did require her to be stoned, but it required both the man and the woman to be stoned. And as a lot of people point out, there was no man in this story. The leaders of the religion, they've conveniently left that man back somewhere else. And so what they're really trying to do is to push Jesus into a corner. And they want him to carry the same kind of light, the same kind of judgment that they do. And instead, Jesus does what? He turns the tables in a brilliant way on them. He leans down, he writes in the sand, and there's lots of discussion as to what he writes. He writes maybe perhaps the kind of sins that those men were guilty of. I don't know what he writes. But he looks at the woman and he says the simple thing to her. He says, where are your accusers? This is after they've all left. And he says, I don't condemn you. Go and sin no more. Jesus concludes the story in John 8, verse 12 by saying, I'm the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. What kind of light is Jesus talking about? How does Jesus illuminate our life? You see, he doesn't make light of her sin. He doesn't say, that's just, you were just born this way, or this is just a natural inclination for people to do this. He says, go and sin no more. He carries a light that shines in the darkness, but not one that leaves her hopeless. I like how one writer said it. He said, is there ever a point where we get too sinful for God? If we hit this new moral low, or we set a record in the sin department, is there a line we cross where we simply move beyond God's reach? Jesus says, neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin. Jesus, when he says, I'm the light of the world, what he's saying is, I have come to shed light on the things that need to change, but to do it in a way that brings about redemption, a way that brings about healing, a way that shines the light of hope. I think that's what's probably needed most right now. We're living through a dark time, and people don't need to hear about how God is bringing judgment and wrath, or that this disease is somehow caused by our sin. Instead, they need the people of God to emulate the character of God, and one of those characters is that he shines brightly in the world. One of my favorite authors, she writes wonderful sermons, a lady by the name of Barbara Brown Taylor. She talks about going off into a retreat, and she goes and finds this cave, this dark cave, and she just spends hours in there thinking about the darkness. And she writes this whole book about dark and light and kind of her experience of living in darkness. And she says this, resurrection is always announced with Easter lilies, the sound of trumpets, bright, streaming light. But it did not happen that way. In fact, she says, if it happened in a cave, it happened in complete silence, in absolute darkness, with the smell of damp stone and dug earth in the air. Let this sink in. New life starts in the dark, whether it's a seed in the ground, a baby in the womb, or Jesus in the tomb. It starts in the dark. These are certainly dark times. Let's do everything that we can to shine the light of God into this dark world.
In the beginning, darkness covered the earth. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. The true light, which gives light to everyone, came into the world. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. It is a light for the lost, the searching and the seeking. A light for the darkest valley. A light to drive out fear, even in the shadow of death. When we believe in the light, we become children of the light. It shines in us, through us. If we walk in the light, if we let it shine before others, we become a city on a hill, the light of the world. When we let His word light our path, others will follow. We become a beacon of hope to a world in darkness. Our lives reflect the glory of His resurrection. He makes us a light for the nations, so His salvation may reach to the end of the earth. Let there be light. For at one time you were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light.
So glad you could join us tonight. I want to give you just a few questions, some discussion starters that might help you as a family just to kind of process tonight. First of all, I want you to talk about a time when you were either lost or afraid of the dark. So it can be from your childhood, or talk about maybe why we're afraid of the dark. How did you feel? What did you do? How did you get out of that place of being lost? How were you found again? What did it feel like to come into the light? And then when we read again in John 1, his description of Jesus being the light, what do you imagine Jesus looking like? How is he like light? I know John's using some figurative language. And then talk about this. He talks about Jesus being the light and being the Word. And so just ask this simple question, how is he like a light? In what ways does Jesus light up our world? And then the final question I really want you to discuss is, if you could hear Jesus say anything, remember He's the Word. Like He said to that woman caught in sin, I don't condemn you, now go and sin no more. Or if He said to the blind man, I'm the light of the world, you can see. What would you want Jesus to say to you? What's a phrase? What are some words that you might want to hear the Word say to you? So some simple questions for discussion. Hope you're blessed and can't wait to see you on Sunday. God bless.